Two-way immersion is the other model, and that is with students coming from distinct linguistic backgrounds, and there we've got a variety again. We have our English heritage learners mixed with English proficients, or we have another version of English heritage learners, more like the kinds of mixes that we see in the developmental bilingual model. And then finally, Native Heritage Americans, Native Americans heritage speakers with English proficients. Those we don't have very many of, but we do have some programs, the UPIC Immersion program, where they have one or two students that are not from UPIC heritage that are in the programs, also learning UPIC as a second language, same thing in Hawaiian. And I was just up and working with the Ojibwa Immersion program in northern Minnesota, same thing there. Children going to immersion to learn Ojibwa, even though they themselves do not have Ojibwa heritage. Philosophical stance that really pulls all of these programs together. One, these programs believe that language is a valuable human resource and that children can acquire new languages while still developing their first. That language acquisition is best accomplished through subject learning. And I don't use the term content anymore because language immersion programs are fundamentally about subject learning. And when you're held accountable for being assessed with math standards, social studies standards, science standards, engineering standards, your instruction fundamentally changes. With high language intensity, culture seen as just one way of doing and being in the world, and an understanding that children's sense of ethnic identity and self-esteem improve with culturally aware education. And finally, that subject matter schooling through either a second foreign heritage or indigenous language can be cognitively, academically, and linguistically enriching. Not for some, but for all. The features that dual language and immersion programs hold in common today: sufficient instructional intensity. The guideline is at least 50% of the instructional day being taught where you have subject matter taught through the medium of a minority language. Okay? Clear and sustained separation of languages, still considered essential program feature. Balanced use of form and meaning-focused curricular instructional strategies. The key to any great immersion programs is bilingual and biliterate, incredibly talented teachers and administrators, and support for the majority and or minority, depending on the program model, for that development in the broader community. How about dual language and immersion? And this is the last thing that I'll talk about. What's on the horizon for dual language and immersion programs? And my first thought about this is continued growth. I think we're going to see, and we're certainly experiencing this in Minnesota. We have 2 new programs starting next year already, and I'm already meeting with another district where we're going to be opening yet another 2-way immersion program in the state of Minnesota. So I see continued growth, not only in Minnesota, where I am, but also around the country, experiencing it elsewhere in both 1-way and 2-way program models. The other thing I think we're seeing is we're really seeing a push down with immersion to preschool, and we are seeing a push up for immersion, up and through post-secondary. We're seeing continued growth in third language and struggling learner participants around the country. There are more third language children considering immersion programs. That's, for example, in Minnesota, that's our Hmong language family enrolled in a Spanish immersion program where they're requiring Spanish and English. Growth in that type of participant. We're also seeing growth in struggling learners. We are really doing more to break down the myths that immersion education is really a suitable program model only for some children, but that if you have any kind of language or learning kind of issue that perhaps you shouldn't be in such a challenging program, we have no research evidence to support that, and we are getting that message out better. We, I think, are going to continue to see Arabic, Chinese, Hindi, Korean, and our native languages as well. We're really seeing growth in native language programs. Portuguese, I predict, is going to continue to grow, as well as Spanish. We're also seeing increased attention nationally to how do we move students. Still, this is a persistent issue. It hasn't gone away, and I don't think it's going to for quite some time. How do we move students beyond that intermediate mid to high proficiency plateau? Secondary immersion continuation conundrum. What do we do with that secondary and post-secondary mismatch for our immersion students, and how do we push through that ceiling? Critically important conversation. How do we harness technology in order to solve some of that secondary conundrum stuff, especially secondary and post-secondary? And finally, nationally, we are seeing a shift, and I find this very exciting, from bi to multilingualism. And we really are seeing this. We're seeing in the same way that Culver City moved to house both Spanish and Japanese. That is being replicated around the country, and we continue to see immersion programs moving in that direction. I can speak again about Minnesota. We have a Spanish immersion program that next year will be Spanish and Mandarin immersion. Once you've got two languages in one building, one of the things that more and more programs are doing is, by say 5th grade, they want the students beginning with a third language, which only makes sense given what we know about third language acquisition being easier and more accelerated once you have already acquired a second language. And finally, in my work, I have the privilege really of working all around the country. With Madison, Wisconsin, I was thrilled. We've been working on rolling out a two-way immersion program there now for some 7 years. And we were meeting with the entire district, and it was exciting to hear, to have the director of ESL Bilingual standing next to the director of world language and say, we don't want to be separate departments anymore as district leaders. We want to call ourselves the Department of Multilingual, Multicultural Education, and that's how we see the future. Pretty exciting stuff. Thank you.
Culver City, her parents did not put their children in the immersion program many years ago, but she saw her other friends were in the immersion program, what they had gained. Now she lives in Burlingame, and she has 2 children, and what do you think she did? She had been deprived, she said, so I'm not going to deprive my children. So she got a 2-way program going in Burlingame, and the day, though, that the lottery was drawn, she said, I had to stay home now, and I couldn't. I was so afraid I wasn't going to get in the program after I got, started to get the program going. But isn't that wonderful to see? Because she didn't get that she was going to make it possible for her children. And the other nice thing was that a couple of weeks ago, my daughter, who just moved to New York and started in her nursing career at New York Presbyterian Hospital, put it on Facebook. Thank you, Mom and Dad, for making me learn Spanish. Because today, my first 3 patients were Spanish speaking, and I could communicate with them. I was the only nurse on the floor.